Now, British scientists say there is no concrete evidence to prove the nerve gas used to poison a former double agent in the UK was indeed made by Russia. According to Britain's Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, since the nerve agent required extremely sophisticated methods to create, experts have been unable to establish its country of origin. It was, however, confirmed that the chemical was identified as military-grade novichok, a nerve agent first developed by the Soviet Union in 1971. The findings were provided to the British government in order to piece together a conclusion. The Russian president has reacted to the announcement, saying it is surprising how fast a campaign was launched against his country.
The laboratory was not able to determine the origin of the nerve agent, and they couldn't identify what country it came from, and they were also unable to say if it was manufactured in Russia. In this context, the speed at which the anti-Russia campaign has been launched causes bewilderment. On Wednesday, we will call together a meeting of the Executive Committee of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons in order to investigate this situation in great detail. At a minimum, we will have 20 different questions to discuss.
Well, Vladimir Putin expressed hope that Wednesday's OPCW meeting would put an end to the row. He further demanded that Russia be allowed to take part in the investigation into the poisoning, adding that both of the victims were Russian nationals. Britain says the summit on Wednesday is a diversionary tactic by Moscow. London holds Russia responsible for the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. The incident has stirred a spiraling diplomatic crisis between Russia and the UK's Western allies. Joining us via Skype from Bristol is Tony Gosling. He's an investigative journalist. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, Mr. Gosling. Now, it seems that the UK government and media have a lot of explaining to do, considering they were so quick to point the finger of blame on Russia without any evidence, it seems, and even take diplomatic measures.
Well, the British government have pinned this on Russia, but actually the British military scientific establishment haven't done that, as we've seen today. The chief executive of the Defence Science and Technology Lab, Gary Aikenhead at Porton Down, is saying that actually it's several things he said today. He said it's probably state-made, which is interesting. He's also saying we cannot verify the source, which is really the most explosive claim that they've made. And he's also saying that there was no known antidote. Now, the problem here is we've had our Prime Minister and our Foreign Secretary and our government saying the opposite. On the 20th of March, in an interview with Deutsche Welle, Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, said that Porton Down had told him it was absolutely categorical and no doubt that this novichok was from Russia, was actually manufactured in Russia. So everybody here in Britain is now saying, well, at least I would say the opposition and the military scientists are suggesting that the Foreign Secretary has lied. Now, this really does put Britain in a very difficult position around the world, and it completely destroys the Foreign Office's credibility when it comes to diplomatic relations. And how did they know so quickly if it was from Russia? That's what the question was. Boris Johnson replied, I say again, it's absolutely categorical and no doubt that it was from Russia. I was told this by Porton Down. So we just heard the total opposite today.
Right, so Mr. Gosling, was the British government then relying on faulty intelligence, or were they lying deliberately?
Well, that's almost impossible to tell. What's for sure is that the Foreign Secretary was not telling the truth when he said that Porton Down, the experts here in Britain, the scientists, the defence scientists, had told him it was from Russia. Now, these defence scientists, generally, we don't see them on the television here. They don't say very much. But when they do, they like to get it right. And it seems to me we've actually got a split and a rift here between the military establishment and the Foreign Secretary and the government. And that isn't entirely surprising because this government hasn't been elected. It's been kept in position by a few Irish MPs. It doesn't have a majority. Neither has Theresa May, the Prime Minister, even been elected by her own Conservative Party to lead the party. There was no election. I mean, I think we've also seen more developments in this case which haven't been reported here. And this story, by the way, didn't appear on the BBC until 8 p.m. tonight, about 6 hours after the announcement. And also, Sky have pulled reference to Boris Johnson's previous quote, which is very embarrassing for him. That, look, Sergei Skripal expressed a wish to return to Russia. He worked very closely with a chap called Jonathan Steele, who wrote the fake Trump dossier, if you remember that, which was launched just before the end of the presidential election campaign for Trump. And this company, Orbis Business Intelligence, which is basically a privatized version of MI6, of James Bond. And this suggests to me that this could have been actually a British operation, and because it was going through Orbis, it would be easily deniable by the state. So I think there's all sorts of questions to be asked here. And also, of course, the Foreign Secretary should resign. Other cabinet ministers in Britain have resigned over much smaller things. Michael Fallon, over putting his hand on a journalist's knee, he resigned for that. And that, of course, is nowhere near as serious as Boris Johnson lying about the source of this, and lying about what his defence expert telling him.
Right, very quickly, if you can, Mr. Gosling, having said all that, it also then is an indication of whether or not there is any intelligence, whether or not there is any proof. This government in the UK right now has a very set policy when it comes to Russia and is using different mechanisms to bring that about.
This reminds me of Colin Powell fitting the intelligence around the policy, if you remember, for Iraq. So they've decided what they want to do, and they're just going to juggle and find whatever possible reason and lie if necessary in order to get what they want. I don't think that's going to happen with Russia, because we've learned the lessons, many of us here in Britain, over Iraq. And most of the political establishment don't want anything like that to happen again. So I think actually what Theresa May, Gavin Williamson, the Defence Secretary, and Boris Johnson have done is put themselves out on a limb where actually the civil service is starting to say, you're lying.
All right, let's see how this pans out in the UK. That's Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us via Skype from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, it's always great having you with us here on Press TV.